Your Best Manager, episode 41.
She's one of the people that I've met in life, very few, that just have a incredible balance between concern for task and concern for people.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Your Best Manager podcast, featuring interviews with senior managers and leadership experts, as well as practical advice for first-time managers. And after today's show, be sure to hop over to yourbestmanager.com and check out the free management course, Fully Engaged in 10 Days, where you will learn 3 critical components to increasing employee engagement on your team. Have fun! Leaders aren't born, they're made, everybody. This is Jamie Newman here, and I'm excited to be joined by Dave Stachowiak today. Dave, how are you doing?
Jamie, I'm fabulous. Thanks so much for the invitation to be here. I'm really honored.
Well, I'm honored to have you. Dave Stachowiak is the host of the Coaching for Leaders podcast, a top 10 careers podcast on iTunes, downloaded over 3 million times. He helps leaders get access to the practical wisdom they need to empower the people they lead. Dave was named in Forbes as one of the 25 professional networking experts to watch in 2015, and he's also had a successful career with Dale Carnegie, the global leader in workforce development, and has been recognized multiple times with International Business Awards by Dale Carnegie. Dave has a doctoral degree in organizational leadership from Pepperdine University and serves on the board of the Global Center for Women and Justice at Vanguard University. And I want to say off the top, it's a huge privilege to have Dave on the show. If you remember a few episodes back, I had Richard Ryerson from the Dose of Leadership podcast, and Dave Stachowiak is another one of those leadership coaches and podcasters who just provide incredible value through his show, and someone I've been following and consider, I don't know, some sort of virtual role model or something for the work that I do through Your Best Manager. So welcome to the show, Dave, and why don't you kick this thing off by giving us an overview of your career path and just how you got to where you are today?
Oh, thanks for that introduction, Jamie, and I'm really honored and humbled that you've listened to the show, and I'm so pleased to have been a small part of what you're up to, too. And as far as where I started my career, I've always had a passion for both people and for business. And when I came out of school in 1999, the economy was hot. It was right before the dot-com bust. Mm-hmm. And everyone I knew was getting job offers all over the place. I had a couple of job offers. I had friends who had 3, 4, 5 job offers. People were getting huge signing bonuses to come to work for companies. And I was in the business school in my university, and the traditional thing that I was quote unquote supposed to do was to go work for a big firm downtown Chicago, go work for a bank or one of the consulting firms. That's what all my friends were doing. And I went to a career fair, and I ran into this guy wearing a polo shirt with a bright neon tablecloth. And everyone else had these dark business suits on. Here's the guy with his neon yellow tablecloth. And I'm like, that's the guy I got to talk to. And he was representing this great company. It was a subsidiary of Kaplan at the time that was running neighborhood centers for kids around the country. And they were building out this really cool organization where you could learn a ton about business, but you also got knee deep in education with kids. And as soon as I found out about it, I said, that is the job I'm getting. And I got hired by them and started my career in the for-profit education business, working in an after-school center with kids and managing a whole staff, a team of instructors, and brought me to another part of the country, moved to California to take the job. And it was absolutely fabulous. I learned a ton. I got pushed all kinds of ways. I never thought I would have gotten pushed. I learned very quickly that getting good grades in school does not at all correlate with how quickly you get promoted. Because I got passed over for promotion a couple of times very early on. And there were some hard lessons that came along with that. But I also learned a ton about myself and about my blind spots. And it took me on a journey that ultimately led me into doing coaching and then coming to work for Dale Carnegie, where I've had the privilege to work now for 13, 14 years. And ultimately led me to having a desire and a passion to start a podcast 6 years ago and to do something for leaders that was something I really wanted earlier on. So I didn't make as many of the mistakes that I made.
Yeah. Wow. Time flies. I knew your podcast started in 2011, but I didn't click that that's 6 years.
I know it's hard for me to imagine too. It's really been a while.
And you produce your show weekly. So how many podcasts is that?
Closing in on 300. We're in the 280s right now. So yeah, it's pretty much. I think we missed a week the week my son was born, and
Unacceptable.
We missed a week when my daughter was born, and then I think there was one other week. But other than that, it's been consistent every Monday for the last 6 years. And that, when I started off, that was one of the things. I mean, things are different now in 2017. We're recording this, but in 2011, there was not a leadership show that was weekly, had good audio quality, and really good guests.
Mm-hmm.
That just, those three things were not in a show out there. And I just decided, well, I can't find the show I want, so I guess maybe I'll just create it and see what happens.
Yeah, fantastic. Wow. Well, congratulations on building a successful career, Dave. And I'm wondering, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit more and tell the listeners a little bit more about who Dale Carnegie is and what type of work you do with them. Because I was saying that when I first got hired into my last company, Aerotech, which would have been 9 years ago, the first thing that they did was hand me a book, and it was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And awesome. They said, hey, if you get this, you'll be able to work here.
Yeah. That's fabulous. It's one of the books. I think there's two books that are must reads if you're, I would even say if you're a human being. Forget the business, forget the leadership. One of them is How to Win Friends and Influence People. The other one's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
And you know what? I haven't read that one, but I know I should.
Yeah, it's just a great framework for life, and so many things come back to. I probably refer to at least one of those books, if not daily, certainly weekly, in my work with clients, and I think about a lot of the models from both of those books. And Carnegie was really brilliant in what he did. Is he took all of these timeless principles that all of us learned in kindergarten, which is listen, take the time to think about the other person's perspective, use a person's name, smile, the core principles that if you asked almost anyone, what are the things you should do in order to have good relationships with others? Most people could, fill out if they wrote down 10 or 15 things, it would probably match up with 80 to 90% of the chapters in that book, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the challenge is even though we all know we're supposed to smile, a lot of us don't do it. So there's this disconnect between what we know and the behaviors we actually want to exhibit to build the relationships in the world that are going to support others, support ourselves, support our careers, and support our organizations. And what Carnegie was really brilliant at is getting people to actually do those things. And so he took these timeless principles, put them in a book that was really accessible, made it very easy for people to read, and then launched a training company around it that focus not on teaching people the principles, although we've done that over the years for sure, mm-hmm. but it's really way more about how do you start to make this a consistent behavior. And so Carnegie put in the experience of the courses of the process of really getting people to do the behaviors. And that's where all the time and the development spent when folks work with the Carnegie organization of developing those behaviors very consistently.
And why did you choose to work with Dale Carnegie? Like, why not another consulting firm?
Well, I'd love to tell you there was some grand strategy that I went out and figured out that Carnegie was the best organization out there. And I actually do really think that Carnegie is better at that than any other organization. But I didn't know that at the time. What happened was it came out of failure. I finished my career. I decided I didn't want to work in an education center for the rest of my life. I had a great run with that. But I decided to start off and to do some coaching one-on-one. And I went to a coach training program, started my own coaching business. I was all of, I think, 22 or 23 or 24 years old at the time. And figured I had, I'd been a manager for a couple of years. I had a college degree. I knew everything I needed to know about my coach. Right?
Yeah.
So went out, started my own business. I actually did work with a few clients and had some revenue coming in, but it became very apparent very quickly that I needed a lot more help and experience to really be able to do the kind of work I wanted to do. And so I ended up going into debt. I didn't know what to do next. So I started going to grad school because I just didn't know what else to do at the time. And at some point, I decided I needed to start working again. And so I ended up sending an email to the 30 or 40 people I knew best in the world at the time, mostly friends. And I said, I've been doing these graduate classes. I think that, I think here are some of the things that I'm really interested in. I think I'm interested in leadership. I think I'm interested in, management and operations. And so, and I did my best in the email to teach people how they could help me. Mm-hmm. And that's, by the way, one of the things I often teach my clients is people want to help you. You have a lot of people in your life, or at least a few people in your life who care about you and want to help you, but they often just don't know how. Yeah. And so someone had given me the advice to, teach people how to help you. And so I wrote this email, and one of my friends was taking a Dale Carnegie course, and he emailed me back and he said, I was thinking about your email, and I talked to the instructor, and turns out they're always looking for good people, and he'd like to meet you. And that's how it started.
Wow. That's an awesome story. I'm so glad I asked you that. That's awesome. And such good advice. I love that. Teach other people how to help you. I don't know why we don't. Maybe there's a fear of being selfish, but it is true. It's the same. So I often bring this up. I don't know if I share this much on the podcast, but I often bring this up when I'm talking to people about how to get promoted. And sometimes people are afraid of I don't want to play the political game. And I don't want to just be shouting around about what I want and how great I am. But business leaders, business owners, managers, they make decisions based on what they know. And if they don't know what you want, if they don't know what you're trying to do, if they don't know what you're doing, you're not going to get promoted.
Yeah, indeed. And every organization has politics. And if you're not aware of that in your organization, you're probably not seeing it, because every organization has it. And virtually every successful leader I know has learned how to maneuver within the politics and the political game within their organization. And politics, gets a bad rap, but politics is also a very positive thing too. So there's a lot of good things you can do by influencing politically within the organization that ultimately advances the organization, the people around you, your team, the customers. So, being able to navigate through politics and to do that in a savvy way that is truly helpful to the organization is actually, I think, a key competency for most leaders to have.
That's so good. Because you just made me think. Someone gave me that advice, because I've been there where I've been like, well, I don't want to share all the time because I don't want to be that guy who's always talking about himself. And I don't remember the words that he used. I think it was my last boss, but he said, well, it's more selfish for you to give something or to keep something to yourself that could be valuable to other people. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're saying. It's like if you've got something to share, if you've got good things and you're genuinely wanting to help people, you need to communicate those things and you need to make it known. And yeah, you have to have some political savvy in order to truly help other people. Because if you don't get noticed and you can't navigate through that, you may not get the opportunities to talk to the right people or to gain the opportunities to be a person of influence. So I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's where Carnegie was so brilliant at. There's, of course, an art to doing that well, and Carnegie really taught a lot of us on how to do that well and how to strike that balance. Because if you can do that well, then you can ask for help and you can do the things that good leaders do. And one of the things, and I think in a lot of ways, in American culture, we probably struggle with this even a little bit more than some of the other cultures because we have this very much a individualistic culture of, I'm this self-made person, self-made man, self-made woman who, I figured this all out on my own and I became a leader. I started this company. And that's just really a myth. Mm-hmm. It really is a cultural myth that things work that way. And if you go and talk to almost anyone who started a successful business or is a senior executive in a large company or is in a leadership capacity in any way, and you really start asking them about what are the things that led to their success, you'll hear tons of examples of here's how this person helped me, here's who so opened the door for me, here's who I asked for help for. almost to a person. And you realize pretty quickly that if you want to influence the world well, you better be willing to ask for help. And learning how to do that is just so important for leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what a great segue. You need other people. So why don't we move into the golden question for today's interview? And Dave, why don't you tell us who was your best manager? And maybe it wasn't a mentor, or maybe it wasn't a manager, so it could be a mentor, but who had the most significant influence on your career and why?
I've been really fortunate throughout my career that I've had a lot of really great managers. I don't have the story that a lot of people have of having worked for the crazy the boss that made you went home and you were just dreading coming into work the next day. I've certainly had people who are better and worse over the years, don't get me wrong, but I've been really fortunate. The person that I thought of right away, though, when you were saying that is way back when I was in college, working a part-time job. I worked for one of the deans of the school that I went to. I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And Rhonda Kurtz was one of the deans there at the time, still is. And I worked for the summer orientation program, and it was a part-time job during the year, and it was a almost a full-time job during the summer. And I was a coordinator for the program. And she just was fabulous. She's one of the people that I've met in life, very few, that just have a incredible balance between concern for task and concern for people. And most of us have a preference for one of those. And good leaders need to do both, right? So you need to both be good at taking care of people, and you also both need to be good at getting things done in the organization so you get the results you want. And she just has this wonderful balance of being able to do both of those well. And along with that, just an unbelievable commitment to excellence. And you would see that in her actions every day. You would see that in her language that she would use. And she had incredibly high expectations. And as one of her employees, I never wanted to disappoint her. And all the people around her, I mean, everyone had just this tremendous amount of respect for her, and never wanted to disappoint her. And it really was, it really gave me a very early view into what an effective leader can do to set a high standard for the organization. And just one example of that, I remember we went through this whole hiring process where we'd hire staff for the university. So it was this big application call, and it got to the point eventually where we'd send out all of these letters of acceptance or denial letters, and there was 100 letters that we'd send out at the point in the application process. And we had printed them all out one day, and we were looking them over, and it turned out the margins were wrong on the letters. The university letterhead, the university logo was up wherever, and the margin was a half inch off. And I saw it, and I was like, not a big deal. No one's ever going to notice that. And she looked at it, and I don't remember how the conversation went. It wasn't one of those like, you have to redo this, that kind of thing. But I remember we ended up tossing this was before we all knew we were destroying the planet. we ended up tossing them all in the recycling bin, and we redid the entire day's work of signing all the letters and everything, because it wasn't the way it was supposed to be to represent the university well. And so there was that focus on extremely high expectations. But then at the same time, and perhaps even more importantly, an incredible commitment to people that she invested in. And probably one of the things that sticks out in my mind the most is I had a girlfriend at the time in college, and we had been dating for a couple of years, and the relationship ended, as a lot of college romances do. And I was just really, I thought my life was ending, like a lot of us do with first, relationships. And I didn't know who to call. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and it seemed like my friends weren't being helpful, and I just called her. And she came out from in town, drove to campus, sat with me in my dorm room, and watched me cry for, I don't know, an hour or so, and just was there with me.
Wow.
And asked me questions. And I remember she gave me some really great advice at the time, but just was present. And that's the kind of thing that you don't do as a manager or as a human being if you don't genuinely care about someone. And she would do that for people all over campus. And it really, for me, I feel really grateful that I had her as an example for what real excellent leadership looked like early on in my career.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, both of those things, because you're right. Oftentimes we find the leaders and managers who, hey, I want to be a friend, I want to be the shoulder, I want to be the first person they call, I really care about my people, but I'm afraid to set expectations too high because I don't want them to not like me, or I don't want them to fail, or I don't want to be a mean boss. And so you do get that one side, and then you get the other side where it's like all about results, and I don't give a flip who's on my team. We're going to achieve this. So I guess my question is, how do you do that? Because that's a lot easier said than done, right?
It is, and I bet everyone listening to this knows what side they fall on, and I think you probably have for a long time. So this isn't a part of it is I think we owe it to ourselves and our organizations to always be getting better. So whichever side that you fall on, if you're a task-oriented person, I think you owe it to yourself and your organization to be getting better at the people side consistently. And so that is things like listening to this podcast, that is reading leadership books, that is going to trainings, getting coaching on things that are going to help you to be better with people. And I think the opposite's true too. If you're really great with people and getting things done, or strategy or task management or delegation aren't skill sets that come naturally to you, I think you owe it to yourself and your organization to get better at those same kinds of things, trainings, development, coaching, learning the tools that you're going to need in order to do that better. And then the other piece of that is getting other people in your organization around you who are way better at those things than you are. And that's one of the key competencies of leaders too, is you don't want to create an organization with people who look and have the same strengths as you do and think the same way you do. That is our tendency for a lot of us when we hire people, because we tend to get along with people who think kind of the same way we do. If you look at friendships and all those kinds of things, but in organizations that can be pretty challenging if you're only having people that all have the same strengths as you do. And so hiring a really diverse team, and I mean diverse in every aspect of the word diversity, of strength, of skill set, of experience, will really help you to guard against you and then the organization erring too much on one side.
That's good. Yeah. So why don't we? Yeah, I kind of want to just go back and listen to what you just said again. So that was great.
See, that's the beauty of a podcast, is you hit the back 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Or whatever app you're using, you could listen to it again.
Yeah. Well, I started writing some of the things down that you said, and then eventually I just gave up and started listening, and I don't even know where to go from here. But
could I say one more thing about that?
Please.
The traditional way of thinking about this is that that people say, well, I don't want to, if I have to err on one side of working for someone who's a task manager versus working for someone who's a people manager, that I'd rather work for the people manager person, right? Like that's the kind of person that I want to have as a leader. And I always thought that too, because I thought, well, I want someone who's nice.
Yeah.
knows how to support me. And I worked for someone earlier in my career who was absolutely amazing. Probably one of the best people I've ever met at the relationship piece of business, a fabulous leader on that, really developed people well, but really struggled with the task piece and having strategy for the organization and getting things done. And let me tell you, it's just as bad in the long run. It's easier on the front end, but in the long run, it's challenging, because you get to a point as an employee or as an organization where things just aren't happening. Things aren't being accomplished in the organization. Objectives aren't being met. And so I think that if that is your bias, anyone listening, like it was for me, of, it's okay to err on the people side and the task stuff will take care of itself. It doesn't always. And so it's really important to have both of those inside of yourself as a leader, and knowing which one you tend to prefer, and and finding the ways to compensate for that, either through your own development or through hiring other people who are going to help you to really do a better job at the one you're not great at.
Yeah, so good. And you can, I mean, we've talked about, but you can do both. I mean, if you have high expectations and you have results, I mean, if you want to perform well as a manager, your performance is going to be based on the performance of the people on your team. And the best way to motivate and inspire them is help your team understand the correlation between their performance and what's important to them personally. And if you can find out what someone wants in their career, what someone wants in terms of maybe it's even however they define work-life balance, but if you can get to know your team, find out what's important to them, you can leverage them to achieve better results by showing them how their performance impacts what's important to them personally, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And so many leaders miss that. So many leaders miss that. They hear one of their employees say, well, I want to go start my business in a couple of years. And they start to think in a panic mode of like, oh my gosh, this person is going to be leaving in a few years and they're not going to be around and I'm not going to invest in them. And when I hear something like that, or a client says something like that, my first thought is, how can I help this person make that transition successfully? Because if I want that person to stay engaged with me and with our organization for as long as makes sense for them to do that, one of the best things I can do for them and for me and for the company is to figure out with them, what is it you need to learn that's going to support you in making that next transition? And how can we support you now in getting the experience in doing that and aligning your job and the things you're doing to get you to that larger goal? And, that's never going to happen perfectly, but to the extent that you can start to help someone to develop a skill set that they would need, for example, to become a business leader, they're eventually still going to leave, of course, if that's their goal, and as they should. If that's what they're called to do in the world and that's their passion, why would you want to stop them from doing that? But the great thing is they're going to leave in an entirely different way than if you just wrote them off.
Yeah.
They're going to make a great transition out. They're going to make sure that there's someone coming in that's going to help. They're going to support the next person. They're going to talk about you in the community. They're going to refer other people to you eventually that will be good fits for your organization. And it's just it's a mindset that I find that a lot of leaders kind of get into I'm worrying about today and tomorrow and maybe next week, but I'm not thinking about really investing in people over their entire careers, whether they work in my organization or not.
Yeah. So good. And I'd bet if you talk to some extremely successful restaurant and franchise owners, they'd probably have some really good insight into this because oftentimes, I mean, I worked at McDonald's for 5 years and that's a pretty long time to work at McDonald's. But if you're running a McDonald's, I mean, you've got to expect that your top high school students that you hire, they're eventually going to leave, but that doesn't mean you write off your whole restaurant. And although I guess maybe it's a little bit more obvious there because you don't have a choice, you just have to assume that people are going to go to college and leave. But those principles stay true. So I think it's great that you brought that up, Dave.
I was just hearing another interview on a podcast with my friend Tom Henschel, who was on a podcast talking about restaurant management, and he made the point of like everyone's going to leave. If you're working in a restaurant. If you're working in a restaurant and it's part-time staff, and especially like if it's in a college town or something like that, of course everyone's going to leave. So rather than having an employee workforce that you never talk with and never connect with, and then they just one day they come in and they give their notice, what if you gave regular feedback? What if you found out where they were going and how you can help and how you can support them and how you can coach them daily to get to the skills they want to get to? They're still going to leave, of course, but boy, is it going to be a different experience while they're there. And they're going to do such a better job of taking care of you, your organization, and also making that transition smooth. And one of the things, and I know you're a fan of Gallup too, Jamie, one of the things Gallup has found over the years is, ask the question that's a big difference maker is, for employees is, does your manager have your back? And as far as how engaged you are with the organization. And if you're asking questions like that, if you're giving regular feedback, both positive and constructive, you're helping people to get better. If you're interested in what they're going to do in their careers, if you're interested in what they do outside the workplace, it doesn't have to be a sit down long, hour long conversation. It could just be a minute or two a day. If you are that kind of a person, you are going to have a workforce way more so than someone who's not, who's engaged, who is connected to what they're doing and believes in the job, whether they're going to be there for the rest of their careers or whether they're going to be there for another 6 months.
Wow. We could probably keep talking about this for another hour.
Well, good, especially now that I know you worked at McDonald's, because I worked at McDonald's too. So
oh, did you?
We could talk about twisting soft serve cones and ordering Big Macs and making cheeseburgers.
Yeah. And actually, well, since we are talking about it, I've got to share it because I haven't shared this before. One of the best lessons I learned about management and leadership was at McDonald's, and it was early. It also gave me the same arrogance that you've talked about. I left McDonald's and thought I knew how to manage people because I'd been doing it for 2 years. But I remember when I was learning how to be a swing manager, which is basically your shift manager, and our general manager was showing me how, and I was supposed to shadow him, and he didn't do anything. And he didn't do anything intentionally. He would stand right in between the counter and the front counter and the drive-through. And he stood there and he's like, this is the spot you want to be. If you are running your team correctly, you aren't doing a single thing. But what you're doing is you're standing here where you can see everything that's happening and you can find out where something needs to happen, where things are going well, and you can pull and move people around without having to get involved. He's like, you watch some of the managers that aren't very good and they're hands-on all the time and stressed out. He's like, I just stand here, see an opportunity where I can jump in, I jump out. And I delegate someone over here, and I say, go over there. And that really stuck with me. So, yeah, we could talk about McDonald's forever.
Oh, it's a perfect example of what Simon Sinek said when he came on the Coaching for Leaders show of leaders aren't responsible for the numbers. Leaders are responsible for the people responsible for the numbers. And it's you're right. So often managers, leaders, whatever title it is you put in there, jump in and they're doing the work themselves or they're correcting the work that's been done instead of doing the coaching and creating the environment and holding the space where the employees are the ones who are shining and able to perform well. And the manager and the leader really allows that to happen and then steps in where it's helpful to serve and to coach and to help them be better.
Yeah. Yep. Love it. We're so far behind time, but I want to hear, Dave, what's going on in your world today that's exciting you? What's happening with the podcast these days, with your business? What's going on?
Well, the podcast is going well. I founded it 6 years ago, as we talked about. It's had over 3 million downloads now. I get a lot of email. So that's the thing that really is sort of a blessing and a curse every day. I get emails from all over the world every day. And I think back to some of what we were talking about earlier of, what would I have wanted when I was earlier on in my career journey and especially as a leader. And there's a lot of places you can get leadership training, right? This podcast, Jamie, people listening are getting training listening to this. Certainly my podcast, conferences, training programs. But there's not a lot of options for leaders to really grow sustainable relationships with others that are outside of their organization. Unless you want to go to one of those really like ultra exclusive mastermind programs where you fly around the world and you get together with people a few times a year, but that's just not accessible for most people, both time and cost. So I started just thinking to myself, like, how can I really help people and help leaders to learn, but also to create a community around it where leaders and perhaps even more importantly, not only develop leadership skills, but develop really strong relationships with each other and friendships that last their whole career. And so about 1.5 years ago, I founded the Coaching for Leaders Academy. It's a year-long leadership development cohort. It's an intimate group of participant leaders who work personally with me to develop their leadership excellence and to empower each other. And we do it all virtually through HD video conferencing. And it has been going tremendously. It's been really exciting to see a big community of people come together and support each other in a way that really makes leadership a lot less lonely than it often is.
Yeah, sounds exciting. And if you haven't checked out Dave's podcast yet, or you can actually hop over to his website, and there's I'm going to forget what it's called. And the funny thing is, we were talking before, I only actually just registered for it today, but you can become a free member and and get some additional access to some, I guess, archives of some of the work that you've been doing as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I'm honestly butchering it.
No, you're right on. All the podcast library the last 6 years, all the experts I've had on the show are on there. And I think probably the thing that may be really helpful to people if they are visiting it for the first time is when you set up the free membership, you get access right away to an audio course. It's a 10-day audio course, and it's called 10 Ways to Empower the People You Lead. And what I did about 6 months ago is I took the best conversations I've had with the best leadership experts over the last 6 years of the show, and really made the lessons super concise, got them down to 10 minutes a day for 10 days. And I said, here's the 10 that if you did these 10 things, you would be empowering people probably better than 80% of the leaders out there. And so it's a good starting point just for some new ideas. And so you can get to it just by going to coachingforleaders.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing about that. And we've run way over time, but I do want to ask you one last question, and that is for you to maybe recommend a book or three that you think that would be helpful.
I told you I might recommend three. See, now we're over time, and now I'm just making things worse.
That's okay, because it's a good conversation. If you were doing a terrible job and this was boring, I'd cut it right now. But but yeah, share the three books you think would help new managers and new leaders as they're starting their journey.
Okay, so the first one we already talked about, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book. I'd recommend it for anyone who hasn't read it before. For new managers specifically, a fabulous book that came out from the Gallup organization years ago is called First Break All the Rules. But the lessons from that book are still as relevant today as they were when the book was first published. And one of the big lessons is that the best leaders spend the most time with their best people. And that's contrary to what a lot of first-time managers do. A lot of first-time managers, their best people, they ignore, and they spend a lot of time working on corrective behavior and coaching and feedback to the low performers in the organization. So like anything, there's a balance. But the research that Gallup's done over the years, and they've done more of it than probably anyone on management, is that the best leaders are spending the most time with their best people. Those are the people they're investing in. And then the third book is actually inspired by one of your previous guests, Barry Posner, Jamie, and that's The Leadership Challenge. If you were looking for one book on just all of the key foundational principles to be a good leader, I don't think there's a better read than The Leadership Challenge. It's now in its 5th edition, and I love what these guys have done of putting together a model that's not only so solid, but it's based on research from real life actual leaders out there in the world. So they don't really research like the celebrity big name leaders. They are going and researching and talking to leaders who are, leading small businesses and medium-sized businesses and nonprofits in local communities. And they've really developed a model that I think is just fabulous. And it's a great starting point for your leadership philosophy.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing those. I will put those book recommendations in the show notes, as well as a link to your podcast and a link to your website, coachingforleaders.com. And those show notes are really easy to find. You can just hop over to yourbestmanager.com and search Dave from the homepage. You'll find everything from today's episode. And managers, I'm not sure if you're traveling to or from work, getting a workout in, or simply taking some time to relax and listen today, but I hope that you've been encouraged and inspired from our fantastic conversation, maybe a little long, but our fantastic conversation with Dave Stachowiak. Dave, thanks again for sharing some of your story with the next generation of leaders. I truly appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Jamie, the pleasure was mine. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
All right, everyone, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Now hop over to yourbestmanager.com and take advantage of the free tools, resources, and training which I've created exclusively for you, the next generation of leaders. Oh, and have fun.